Hey, y'all. Thanks for joining us for Let's Talk today. Today, we want to discuss the issue of blended families. And I grew up in a blended family. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And we also have here with us today Pastor Curtis Honeycutt from our Calvary Church and Pastor Patrick Hampton, who is a music pastor here at the La Plata campus. All of us have grown up in this situation, and this issue of divorce, remarriage, and therefore blended families is becoming just a normative issue in our culture. So I tell you what, on the issue of blended families, let's talk. All right, today we want to talk about blended families. And we want to talk about, when we talk about blended families, we need to understand that we are talking about a large group of our population that has grown up or is currently living in a blended family situation. Now, I'll start here by saying I grew up in a blended family. My dad left when I was about 18 months old. Mom was still pregnant with my sister. And so Mom married my stepdad, Gray, when I was about, 6, 7, 8 years old, something along those lines. I still remember the first time I saw him. He came in and he turned the corner and he had this little belly on him. And Mom asked, after he left, Mom asked, well, what do you think? And I said, well, he's a little fat. you know. Yeah. So, I remember the first time I saw him. And then I remember when they got married and we moved in with them. And so he already had, I love telling people this, I have a sister, I have a sister, a half brother. With Gray, there's a stepsister, a stepbrother, and a stepbrother, because there was a child from his first marriage that was not his. He was stepdad. So, and then never mind. That's who I grew up with. I grew up in a very blended family. Now, we didn't do things like, I called my stepbrother and stepsister brother and sister. We did those kind of things. So it didn't seem to everyone like it was a blended family, but in the end it was. And so that's my story. That's how I grew up. Patrick, why don't you tell us about yours?
Well, okay. So originally I didn't grow up in a blended family, but then some people know, like, my parents got divorced when I was in high school, and so that happened. And then when I was about a junior in college, my mom got remarried. And so this is where the funny part of the blended family comes in. So my mom remarried a Caucasian male. And so when she did that, when she married Michael, he had two sons. And so one was Connor, one was Tyler. No, that's terrible. Sorry, Tyler. But when she got remarried, it was me, my brother and sister, and then Connor and Tyler, who are obviously not the same color. So we were so it's hilarious because somebody would ask, how many siblings you got? I said, well, right now I got 3 that are the same, and then I got 2 that are not, but we're about 5. And so then later on this past year, last year, my dad got remarried to a Caucasian lady, and she has 2 little children. So she has Marlo and Grayson, and so Grayson has Down syndrome, and Marlo's she's 9 or 10. And once I have these really little ones, and the others are closer to our age, so it's all across the border. It's just hilarious because blended family means legit blended families.
I remember meeting your family at your graduation, and Tina and I were trying to put it all. We're trying to just put it all together, and you're trying to not say something stupid.
Yeah. And it's hilarious. And so it happened, and as I was sitting one day, I was just talking to my dad. I was like, I never thought I was gonna have this many siblings across the border. It's everybody's just different. But I love it because it's beautiful. Both my parents are happy, and right. The relationship between them is stronger now. And I just have a lot of siblings. I have siblings that are my age, and I have 2 little ones that are oh snap! Santa still is relevant into their life. So it's just really cool because you get to be a big brother to a very different capacity, and then with them they're still innocent. They don't really see the whole color thing. So it's oh, that's brother. And it's yeah. It's so I think Grayson, because he had Down syndrome, he did say once, so he's my brother, and they're yeah, but he not look like me. And I was yeah, but it's good times. It's good times.
That's amazing. What about you?
Well, I won't tell you the whole story because we'll be here for a while. I mean, so my dad adopted me, so I'm adopted with my dad. So I actually met my biological father a couple months back. But so mom got remarried, so stepdad, and then they had some kids. So I have a brother, sister there, and then my dad remarried twice now. And
This
so
is your adopted dad.
my dad who adopted. Yeah,
Yes.
so.
Got to make sure we keep the story straight.
Yeah, sorry. It's blended. But I mean, even right now, so I have 6 little sisters. I have a little brother. I have a stepbrother who I grew up with, my age, and he's Chinese. So me and him would always we're brothers, and people would look at us funny, and we would never give him an explanation. We're just deal with it. So I mean the short version, that's the story.
Well, my dad then remarried. And I had a half brother, but then he remarried again, and so I have 2 more stepsisters, and so look, this is the way our world works these days.
Yeah.
It's almost like that old country song where they go through the whole process, and in the end, I am my own grandpa, And so I mean, it's just the way the world works. But sometimes blended families work better than other times. So in our story. The differences between my stepdad's name was Goodman, Gray Goodman. The differences between the Goodmans and the Hilsons, my stepbrother and stepsister and my sister and I, were always we did not try to highlight them. In fact, we really tried to downplay them. But the differences were quite stark in the way that Michelle and I saw the world and in the way we thought and grew up and developed versus the way Danny and Karen thought and grew up and developed. And it's very interesting to me. This is the whole nature versus nurture conversation, because we really did think differently. And it seems that difference in thought, that difference in way of processing the world, was more inborn than it was a matter of environment, because we were all growing up in the same environment. But we went very wildly different paths. So I think that was one of the challenges inside of our blended family, and so I don't know, what did you sense as challenges, or I mean, one of the positives was I have a connection and I have a section of family in North Carolina that I never would have had. And I grew up in a place that my biological parents, my biological father never would have taken me. I grew up on a farm, and my dad would never have been on a farm. And so I had a lot of experiences I would not have had otherwise. So there are great positives, and there's these things are not the same.
Yeah.
I mean, we were the same. We had the same color skin, but we were not alike, and still aren't to this day. So I'm just curious, what's your experience with that?
Well, I mean, for me, it was such a cool thing, because it's even something that I had wrestled with recently, because the reason that I had gone back and had the conversation with my biological father and met him is because I felt God nudging that you need to reach out and you need to tell him you forgive him. So as I'm going through this process and I'm wrestling about reaching back out to my biological father, as I'm thinking back, I wanted to make sure that I had forgiven him. And I realized that there's never been any bitterness. There's never been this hole, because I had this guy step into my life.
Right.
And even through another divorce, still assume responsibility for me.
Right.
And never threw it in my face, and he was my dad. So I don't know if I've told you.
That's true. My dad left young enough that I don't remember. The first time I remember seeing my dad, I was probably 9 years old.
Yeah.
The first time I remember physically seeing him.
Yeah.
And so I didn't experience. I had the same thing. I didn't experience this gap with my dad not being there, because Gray was there.
But I got to do something so cool. So I don't know if I had told you this before. On Father's Day, the year that Calvert opened, my dad doesn't go to church normally, but I invited him to come to church, and I preached this sermon on Father's Day. And I got to point at him and look at him and say, because of you, I understand. It makes sense to me what Jesus did.
Right.
Because of what you did for me. And that was such a cool moment. So for me, like, I see it as God's provision. It was a blessing, you know, that I had this guy step into my life, and now I have all these little sisters. And
Right.
you know.
Right.
I think for me it was different because, like, you know, my dad was just there. Like, you know, like I said, like, there wasn't a time when my dad wasn't there. It was just, I think it took a while to adjust because, like, you know, like you start off with, like, you know, 5 people, then a divorce happens and it's like, okay, so we're still a family of 5, we're just not 5 connected like that anymore. Like, we're just kind of like 5. So there was moments in high school where I had to, like, wrestle with that. And then I think when the idea that someone else was coming into the picture and coming to the family, it's like, oh, okay, like, you know, like it's like, you know, when my mom introduced us to Michael, like, it wasn't a thing of just like, oh, you know, what's he look like or whatnot. Like, when he came in, we were just kind of looked at him like, oh, he's country. Okay. Like, it was just like, you know, he's a nice guy, he's funny, he's cool, and we, like, you know, we connected with his kids, and I was like, all right, well, hey, this becomes a thing. Then, like, you know, we just got 2 white brothers that we just need to so badly, like, change their music style. It's just it's terrible. Like, they're not even. They're like into just the weirdest music. I was like, bro, we gotta help y'all. But then it was one of those things where it was something that we didn't feel the need that we had to explain it to people. But, you know, like, some people just always just want to ask the question, like, so how is it? Like, is it weird? Like, you know, your mom married a white guy, and now you have, like, stepbrothers that are, like, white. It's like, no, it's normal. It's just kind of normal. And then when, you know, our dad remarried a white lady, and then, like, you know, we have this, like, white siblings. Like, now it's like, okay, like, it's just this whole spectrum of you can look at it and people just not always understand it. But I think through those experiences, like, I don't know, it's really shaped my eyes on just, like, what family could be. Like, you know, family's not blood related all the time. Like, you know, sometimes you can have family members that are family, but they're just not blood. And, like, I don't know, I think that's, even with the experiences that I experienced, like, it's shaped so much of how I view family. Like, you know, like, to me, there's a lot of friends from, like, college that I still call brothers. Like, you know, we've talked about being each other's weddings, and like, you know, my sister will call them, like, brothers, but they're not literally her brothers, like, physically, like, by blood, but, like, just because of that relation, that deftness. And, like, even the relationships I have here, like, there's some, like, people on staff that I consider literally family. Like, I'm calling, like, big bro, little sis, auntie, uncle, pops, Dave. And, like, you know, like, I call them so many things because to me it's just like, it's just a family. The way I see people is just by family, and it's just like, it's simply not just by, like, okay, you were born into this. Like, no, we're just family.
It
just have
is.
a connection.
It does change the way you view family. I mean, you and I'm seeing right now, you and I with the same challenge. I use the word dad. Daddy was the word I use. And when I say that, I'm referring to Greg Goodman. When I'm speaking of my biological father, I call him Paul. And so I just, you know, I have to be careful. It becomes difficult to get people to follow a conversation because I'll say my dad, and people who are in South Carolina who know Paul will think I'm telling a story about him when I'm not. I'm telling a story about Greg. And so because my view of it is, I'll say this, and I don't mean to be in any way offensive. My dad is my biological father, Paul, is back to the Lord now, and is stable, and he's serving. He loves the Lord now. But any male can become a biological father.
Yes.
It's a different thing to become dad.
Yeah.
And so quite frankly, Greg Goodman is the one that carried that title with me, not Paul Hilson. Now, I carry Paul Hilson's last name, and if you ever saw me and him sitting beside each other, you'd go, oh, yeah, I see that, you know. And so I look like him, and I talk like him, and even though I was never raised by him, but Dad is Greg Goodman. You know, so I think that shifts the way you see family. It's not just blood related. It's who stepped in.
It sounds like with the 3 of us, we see things that are big obvious positives with it and things that we love about it, but I believe there are a lot of people. There could be people in our same circumstance that don't see the good, which is true, but there's also people, I think, that through their blended family, they haven't had the same experience of a lot of good that have come out of it. So for you, what advice, I guess, would you give toward that?
Interestingly enough, my mother and I were having a conversation on the phone yesterday, and all of this came up because it's not all good. I'm not going to sit here in front of these cameras and have this conversation about the bad parts of it, and there were some really difficult and bad events that came through that blended family, and my mom once in a while laments that. And you can imagine, for a mother, she chose this mate, she chose this husband, and therefore we were brought into this. And so anything that went bad, she wants to kind of own. And I said to her, I said, Mom, I said, look, the good and the bad made Michelle and I who we are today. It's woven into the fabric of who we are. And my sister is a pastor's wife down in North Carolina. She's had they've had a stable, successful marriage for their entire lives. They have 2 sons, one of whom is going to get married next week. And Tina and I have a very stable, successful marriage. And I said, Mom, we turned out fine. And if you had changed anything, we would not be the people we are right now. Yeah, there are parts of my childhood that I would like to carve out. Not all of them have something to do with my blended family, but there are parts of my childhood I'd like to carve out, but even those parts made you who you are, And so I think finding unity in a blended family is about looking for the positives, because I could have started this whole conversation talking about the negatives, and you guys would have been a whole counseling session about, oh, I'm so sorry, but that's not what I'm going to look at. So, my guess is that you could come up with some stories that were good or bad, but you're not going to create unity that way. We're not going to create unity by saying you're a Goodman and I'm a Hilson. We're not going to do that. That's not going to work. So.
I mean, it's like you said, you find the good and the bad in it. And there were good things that happened. There were bad things that happened. Like, no one's going to sit up here and say, like, it was a Disney fairy tale.
Right.
Like, no one's going to sit up there
and they lived happily ever after.
Exactly. Anyone who's either from a blended family or anyone who's been through any of this would say, like, oh, God, there's been some times, trying times. But, again, it's also like you said, if you look at everything, and you can see, like, I am who I am today because of what I went through. I'm not sure I would change it. Like, and that's great. Like, there's certain things that I would change, but the me now, you say I'm diverse, like to a heavy extent. Like, I'm diverse because I'm not looking at someone who's now in the family saying, like, I don't look at them and say, like, oh, you're supposedly like my person, like, by law, like, no, it's like, no, we're family. And I have 2 different brothers that I can, like, talk to and just check up on, and I have, like, 2 little siblings that I never would have had the opportunity to, like, be a part of. Like Chris last year's Christmas, like our first Christmas together, I got him, he's big into Toy Story, like racing, he was like my Secret Santa, and so I got him Toy Story, and like to see that kid light up over Buzz Lightyear. Like, I would say that's like, Christmas has meant a lot to me forever. Not because I don't, let's just take the Christian side of it. Like I'm talking about, like, I've never been the guy who's like, oh, I want a gift. Like, I just grew out of that. But to give someone a gift and they, like, light up and they play with it the whole entire time you're down there, it's like, wow, like, I haven't got to do that in, like, ever. So that was like a first experience. I was like, I never would have got that if I didn't have a blended family. And so, like, you have to look for those moments, and you have to, like, almost like a daily decision, say, like, my family is my family, and I love my family. Like, good, bad, ugly, like, whatever. Like, at the end of the day, these are my people.
And that's the answer, I believe, to creating unity and strength inside of a blended family. Is not highlighting the differences, but highlighting the similarities. Highlighting. I've said this before to churches and to church groups. You cannot establish unity while celebrating diversity. We've got to celebrate what unifies us and understand
Yes.
the diversity.
Yes.
We can't constantly come in and celebrate what divides us. We got to understand it, and it's got to be real. And yes, there's value in it. I'm not trying to say there's not value in it, but you've got to celebrate what unites you. And that's true in a church. That's true in a nation. That's true in a family.
Yeah.
You know, and because what unites you is that relationship that exists now. And we can have all the theological debates about divorce or whatever, but that relationship that exists now unites this family. Celebrate that. You know.
And I think this is something that I've learned that's been really important for me, is that when you see the things that are broken, don't kill yourself trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And taking the full responsibility of everybody else's decisions on your back, and learn to lead with the way that you live and learn to love the people around you. Because there's a lot of times where I'll want to, I mean, as a leader, we want to go and we want to fix things, we want to mend things, but I think you can wear yourself out in a blended family rather than just building the relationships and loving the individuals in the family.
Do you know what I think a blended family does do for us, though? It teaches you. It teaches you this, because we won't go through the list of things I can't fix, but it does teach you this. But it also, in my life anyway, and I'm the one looking at this from, you know, I'm the older guy. I'm the old guy here. So, in my life, this has made it. How do I say this? This has made it normal. It is normative for us to, and I'm going to use air quotes, adopt people into our family who for whatever reason, it's good for them to join into our family. It's good for them to be a part of who we are. And we're able to do that for a time with people where they can get through a difficult time, and they just, sure, you're in the family now. You know, okay. That's the way this works, and it's just it's natural, because Tina also comes from a blended family, so it's very natural for us to do this, and and it's usually for a time, and it's usually for a reason, but I think when we understand this, and you said this earlier, and you really this is true, when we understand building unity in a blended patchwork, sewn back together family, then we understand how God deals with us. We understand church, because we are a family that is blended and patched together, not by the blood of being related, but by the blood of Christ that ties us all together. And when we can celebrate that, we can find a unity in the midst of diversity, because we're celebrating what unifies us. The love of this marriage between God and His church, the love of this marriage between my mom and my stepdad, the love, all that binds us. And I really think it's a beautiful image of the church. So, thanks for joining us today for our discussion about blended families. If you need to take next steps with this, or have a deeper conversation about blended families, or if you're going through this and struggling with this yourself, there's a link with this video that will give you a time for a Zoom conversation that we're going to provide. It's going to be a one-time small group that meets by Zoom to discuss the issue of blended families and how to bring unity and health into those families. Click on that link and join us for that conversation if that's something that would be helpful to you. Now, if the program today was helpful to you at all, would you like, share, comment, and subscribe? And that would help us as we go forward. So I want to thank you for joining us, and join us next time for Let's Talk.